Welcome to part 2, where I rank my top 100 roller coasters I've ridden as of the end of 2023. Just like last time, figuring out what 50 coasters are worthy of making this and then figuring out how to rank them has proven to be extremely difficult. It's currently December 24th when I'm writing this script, and right now I have been on 786 different coasters around the world. As one may expect, more than half of these are situated in America, but I've also ridden coasters in Canada, Mexico, and 11 European countries. Nothing in Asia yet, but come 2024 I am hoping to change that. With that in mind, my list will constantly be changing as I travel to more places and as I have time to reflect on past experiences. So who knows how my list will look in a year or two. All I can say for sure is I'm proud of what I've put together here, and all 50 of these amazing creations deserve the spotlight in this video. Let me know what you think of my list in the comments, and with that being said, let's dive in. Fantazi Revenge at Kennywood in Pennsylvania is one of the most unique hypercoasters I've ever ridden. Its biggest drop takes place after the first one and shoots down a ravine hitting 85 miles per hour at the bottom. But the real reason it cracks my top 50 is it's got some outrageous ejector airtime in the second half. You are thrown out of your seat consecutively, and it is a lot to handle, which is exactly what I'm looking for in a good roller coaster. The most underrated GCI Woody I've ridden is Volkon Timber coaster at Europa Park in Germany. When I rode this in 2022, it had some of the most outrageous pacing I'd ever seen. It's technically not the longest layout if we're comparing it to similar rides, but the elements it packs in are all rapid fire and full of forces. Plus, the theming in the queue line is impressive, and I love the ambiance around the coaster. Tornado at Volkon in Denmark was a clear top 50 coaster when I first rode it, but only under the condition that it's in boost mode. This is a setting where the ride operators speed up the launch, disable the brake runs, and unlock the train's rotations to its fullest potential. What you have as a result is one of the most frightening and chaotic experiences on a coaster, and personally my favorite roller coaster in Denmark by far. Outlaw Run at Missouri Silver Dollar City is one of the few wood coasters RMC ever built. It gives this ride a lot more of a bite, which I think is amazing, combined with the terrain layout through the woods. It doesn't rank higher because I'm not a huge fan of hang time, and all of its inversions are focused around that, but the airtime and raw power of this coaster is a force to be reckoned with. Widely considered to be the best B&M hypercoaster, Shambala at PortAventura World is indeed a pretty special ride. It's insanely tall and insanely fast, but actually quite gentle as you float over each of its large airtime hills. It also couldn't be smoother, which makes it insanely re-rideable, and I love that about it. I feel like I take Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm for granted sometimes. Being in California, it is at one of my home parks and I ride it quite often, and I think it's because of that I don't often give this thing the love it deserves. It's truly one of the most exciting wooden coasters ever built, combining so much airtime and the best laterals in the world. If you can catch a night ride on Ghost Rider, you will be absolutely floored over how good it is. As I've reflected on past experiences, a ride that shot up my list is Boulder Dash at Lake Compounce in Connecticut. This is one of the most creative and insane wooden coasters in the world. The setting as you fly through the woods feels almost mythical, and I'm always taken aback by the forces on this ride. There are so much airtime, so much laterals, and the pacing is fantastic. There's really nothing bad I can say about this coaster, which is why it's climbed the ranks over the years. Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia is the best B&M hypercoaster in the world, and I can now say that confidently after riding Shambala. Let me cut to the chase. None of the others feature ejector airtime. The last 3 camelbacks on Goliath are all sustained ejector moments, and that's exceedingly rare on a B&M coaster. It's also got my favorite turnaround section on a B&M and a strong first half to top it all off. This is a phenomenal ride, and I'm not sure why it doesn't get more love. Twisted Colossus at California Six Flags Magic Mountain is one of the more unique coasters by RMC. It's the only one with 2 side-by-side tracks, and what I love about this example of a racing coaster is you get to experience both in the same ride. If you went around once and that was it, Twisted Colossus would be nowhere near 42 on my list. Its layout does stand its own though, with some outstanding airtime and 2 exceptional inversions. A lot of people say Wicked Cyclone at Massachusetts Six Flags New England is too long for its own good. Me personally, it's only ever ran amazing and has held great speed throughout its layout. I don't think it can be understated how much airtime this ride has, and in so many configurations too. For example, some of my favorite parts are these outer banks that fling you to the side. It's a great fun coaster that takes full advantage of its dense structure. Lightning Rod at Tennessee's Dollywood is, from what I understand, a shell of what it once was. When I rode it in 2021, I was definitely fairly disappointed by its lack of power. The quad down was everything I'd hoped for, but the rest, far from it. It's still got some unique elements that interact amazing with the terrain, but it's a shame they've had to slow it down over the years. Plus, when it opens in 2024 without its launch, I'm sure that'll hurt it even more in my rankings. Speed is the most underrated aspect of a roller coaster, and Leviathan in Canada's Wonderland is a perfect example why. You are blazing at 92 miles per hour throughout the layout, and it hardly feels like it slows down until the end. The mix of low and high elements on Leviathan are great, and it couldn't be smoother too. Orion at Ohio's Kings Island is similar to Leviathan, but I'd say it has a bit more focus on airtime. My favorite parts are the speed hill and that funky outer bank at the end, but the whole thing is great with its incredibly high speeds and positive forces. Hades 360 at Mount Olympus in Wisconsin is one of the most batshit crazy wooden coasters in the world. It's got the longest tunnel of any coaster, and it's also one of the few woodies to feature an inversion. My only problem with this thing is it's ungodly rough, and I'm not usually one to complain about that sort of thing. Otherwise, it's got one of my favorite layouts ever, and I love it for that. My personal favorite wooden coaster from GCI is Gold Striker at California's Great America. It starts with a very unique enclosed drop before flying through these low-to-the-ground turns and bunny hills. The rest of the ride is pretty typical for a GCI in terms of the layout, but I feel like Gold Striker keeps its speed better than the others. It's an exceptional coaster always, but at night it's out of this world. One of the hardest coasters for me to ever get on was Boardwalk Bullet at Kemah Boardwalk in Texas. This is the most compact wooden coaster in the world, crossing over itself a ridiculous 42 times. All the while it sits on an acre of land, which makes that stat even more insane. It packs in so much airtime, and the pacing is some of the best I've ever seen. Dare I say, it was worth flying to Houston solely to experience it. Probably the most intense roller coaster for its size ever is the Let Coaster at Legendia in Poland. This thing stands just 131 feet tall, but packs in some of the most forceful elements I've experienced. Its 3 inversions are a blast, and it happens to have some great airtime as well. It feels totally out of place in this otherwise weird and uneventful park, but Let Coaster makes a visit completely worth it. Iron Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas has an extremely unique layout from RMC. It dives off the surrounding quarry wall multiple times, and on a few of those occasions, you are getting some unearthly ejector airtime. Its one inversion is also one of my favorites on an RMC, and overall it may be short, but it's a damn good ride. Red Force at Spain's Ferrari Land is a very simple coaster. You launch to 111 miles per hour, climb a 367-foot tall top hat, and drop down into the brake run. However, that launch is one of the best elements I've ever experienced, and the drop is also incredible. It's one of those rides that focuses a lot more on quality than quantity. Legend at Indiana's Holiday World is one of the greatest wooden roller coasters ever built, yet it's not even my favorite one in this park. With 4,000 feet of track, its layout feels like it never ends, and the forces it packs in are outstanding. It's probably in the top 3 for coasters with the most laterals, and there's some sneaky good bits of airtime too. I also think it's got one of the best night rides in the world as well. Shivering Timbers at Michigan's Adventure is just barely my favorite roller coaster from CCI. Look at this thing, it's enormous. It's got a height of 122 feet, which actually isn't as tall as you'd think. However, since it doesn't turn all that much, it's able to facilitate an endless sequence of airtime hills. The coaster feels like it's defying physics in that way, and every single hill does indeed give out of this world airtime. It's a simple layout, but is executed to perfection in my opinion. The best flying coaster I've ridden by far is Fly at Fantazi Land in Germany. This coaster has a stupidly long layout through a beautiful themed area and provides some of the most unorthodox forces one could expect. There's airtime on a flyer, sustained laterals on a flyer, launches on a flyer. It's just an outstanding design that I think Vekoma knocked it out of the park with. A lot of people might not agree with me here, but Millennium Force at Cedar Point is one of the most pure fun roller coasters in the world. It's far from the most intense coaster, but its sense of speed is outstanding, and it has a few great moments of airtime as well. Its setting is also incredible, and that drop makes you feel like you're falling into Lake Erie. On the surface, Expedition GeForce at Germany's Holiday Park looks a lot like a smaller Millennium Force, but they're actually very different rides considering this thing puts more emphasis on airtime than speed, and that airtime has got to be some of the strongest I've ever experienced, especially at the end when it is just back to back. Wildfire at Kolmården in Sweden is one of the most oddly placed roller coasters in the world. Why a zoo decided to build the tallest wooden coaster is beyond me, but it turned out to be a big success in the end. This coaster was built in a stunningly gorgeous location and features an incredible layout hugging the terrain. The first half is among the best of any RMC, the second half though, not so much. This ride was especially hard to rank because I had to strike the balance between the two halves. One of the big two coasters from Poland's Energylandia is Hyperion. This Intamin hypercoaster stands 252 feet tall and has a near perfect layout. Airtime over mostly every single hill, incredibly high speeds, and a vastly different first and second half. I love this ride and I think it would be worth the trip to Poland alone to experience, even though Energylandia has an even better coaster than this one. X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain is a ride that was way ahead of its time. Aerodynamics designed the world's first fourth dimension coaster whose vehicles would have the ability to rotate throughout the ride. Keep in mind, this was in 2002, so it is an objectively flawed coaster. It's not the smoothest or most comfortable ride in the world, but it is absolutely insane, and I think everyone should make it a goal to ride it at some point in their lives. Maverick at Ohio Cedar Point shocked the world when it opened in 2007. Rather than being the super tall roller coaster, it actually barely exceeds 100 feet. Yet in my eyes, it's superior to most coasters that are far larger. It's got the speed, it's got the airtime, it's got the whippy moments, and overall it's one of the most well-rounded coasters purely from a layout perspective. Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion in Virginia has more airtime than you can count. It's one of the most violent RMCs and the sequencing is outstanding. I don't love the inversions, I personally think they feel a little generic, but I have zero negative things to say otherwise. One of the most underrated roller coasters I've ever ridden is Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, a multi-launch coaster from Intamin. The ride has an insanely varied layout with forwards and backwards ejector airtime, a terrific beyond vertical drop, 2 great inversions, and so much more. Say what you want about the lack of theming, I know it had potential, but I could tear apart most other roller coasters for the exact same thing. Toutatis at Park Asterix is basically the well-themed equivalent to Pantheon. Layout-wise, they're virtually identical in quality, but the presentation here was so incredible and there's a very unique ambiance around the ride. The first half is identical to Pantheon, but it switches up after the drop and I appreciated the fact that they were far from cloned. Taiga at Linnanmäki is Finland's best roller coaster by far. It's one of the most creative layouts Intamin's ever come up with because it follows the terrain and has so many elements that use that to its advantage. You've got 4 spectacular inversions, lots of airtime, and a phenomenal pace. It's one of the best launch coasters in the world and worth a trip to Finland alone for. One of the few roller coasters that's actually scared me is the Schwartes Cannon at Hansa Park in Germany. Not only is it the country's best coaster, but it is one of the very best in Europe. The 240-foot tall drop is enclosed by a castle, and the theming continues throughout the queue line. But what's so great about this ride is that the layout would totally stand on its own. It's a high-speed blitz of rapid-fire transitions with a handful of airtime moments sprinkled in, and an inversion to round things out. Conda at Walibi, Belgium is a phenomenal Intamin roller coaster with a virtually perfect layout. The camelbacks in the first half are loaded with airtime, as are the little hills at the end. The turnaround being the non-inverting cobra roll could have been executed better, but I appreciate they tried something different. Other than that, I think this ride is flawless and I can't wait for the day I get to ride it again. Untamed at Walibi, Holland is my favorite small-scale RMC. It maxes out at 119 feet, but it has a stupid amount of airtime and incredible variation as well. It's got 5 inversions, more than any other ride like it, and they're mostly very unique. Like other RMCs, it's also as smooth as a roller coaster gets, making it incredibly re-rideable. Wildcats Revenge at Hershey Park in Pennsylvania is a ride that blew my expectations out of the water. Its variety of elements is tremendous, with traditional, sideways, and lateral airtime combined with 4 great inversions. Wildcats' pacing is also phenomenal on those hot sunny days, so try to visit in the summer if you can. El Toro at New Jersey Six Flags Great Adventure is the most intense wooden roller coaster in the world. The first few elements and last few elements are perfect, filled with obscenely powerful airtime. However, I don't love the middle, which is what keeps it out of my top 10. I'm always super excited to ride this coaster, and I think it deserves its incredible reputation. Batman Gotham City Escape at Parque Warner Madrid is one of the best new roller coasters to open up around the world. It gave this park the headlining attraction it was missing for 2 decades, and I'm happy to say they got an incredible Intamin launch coaster. It has everything from amazing ejector airtime to the best hang time in the world, and great theming, which is just the cherry on top. Probably my most unpopular opinion is how highly I rank the Intamin Strata coasters, and the first we'll talk about is King Ka at Six Flags Great Adventure in New Jersey. I recently decided to move this to number 1 in the park, and I feel pretty confident in that decision. A front row ride on this coaster is the most terrifying and utterly insane experience you can get on a roller coaster. Taking 128 miles per hour to the face as you feel your cheeks melt off is absolutely unbelievable. I'm depressed. I can't believe we'll never be able to ride Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point ever again. This was virtually identical to King Dakar, except it had lap bars instead of over-the-shoulder restraints. Riding this felt like you were free and on top of the world, and I will deeply miss it for as long as I'm a coaster enthusiast. It should come as to no one's surprise that top Thrill Dragster is far and away the highest ranked defunct roller coaster I've ridden. The most divisive roller coaster ever built, in my opinion, is Sky Rush at Hershey Park. This is a very unique, intimate hyper coaster with a layout so compact that the forces are often too much for people. It doesn't help that the restraints are tight but freeing, as that exposes your body to the forces even more so. Personally, I love this coaster and I always have since my first rides in 2018. The airtime is ridiculously powerful, and the sharp lateral jolts are unlike anything you'll find on another coaster. Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa is a behemoth of a ride and one of the best RMCs ever. It's probably the most intense one they've ever built because the pacing and speed at which you take each element is crazy. I do think the second half meanders a little. It's still great but feels a little sloppy. But otherwise, Iron Gwazi is an outstanding ride. Velocicoaster at Universal's Islands of Adventure is my personal favorite roller coaster in the state of Florida. It has the best combination of theming and layout I've ever seen. The first half is a warm-up through a full-on raptor paddock, and the second half is a high-speed journey above pathways, over the water, and literally the best ending ever, the Mosasaurus roll. Fury 325 at Carowinds in North Carolina has been the Golden Ticket Award winner for Best Steel Coaster many years in a row now, and I can definitely understand why. This is the most textbook perfect roller coaster I can think of, standing 325 feet tall, so it's huge, and it's stupid fast at 95 miles per hour. But where it caters to the enthusiast in me is the layout. Unlike some of the other Gigas, so many of this ride's elements are low to the ground, and that sense of speed is out of this world. Zadra at Poland's Energylandia is a ground-up masterpiece by RMC. It has the most insane pacing I've seen, utilizing its 75 miles per hour to the best of its ability. The elements are also amazing with the familiar airtime and inversions you've come to expect, and I also love the spacing in between each element. There's a heavy emphasis on speed and transitions that make this coaster feel so unique compared to similar rides. This is currently my number 2 coaster in Europe. Airy Force 1 at Fun Spot Atlanta gave me the most shocking coaster ride I've ever had. Why this small, ratchet-ass family entertainment center built this massive coaster with one of the greatest layouts ever, I will never understand. It feels like a highlight reel for RMC with the best airtime, best inversions, and most absurd ending to a coaster I've ever seen. It's not as long as some of the coasters I rank higher, but that's the only thing you can even remotely knock this coaster for. Voyage at Indiana's Holiday World is my highest ranked wooden coaster without a shadow of a doubt. It stands 159 feet tall but is able to withstand 6,400 feet of track at a rapid pace. How it's able to maintain all that speed is thanks to the subtle elevation changes in the area. I'll never forget my experience during the park's Coaster Enthusiast event where they turned off the trim brakes and you went flying in the second half. For 2 days of the year, it becomes possibly the best coaster ever, but even under normal circumstances, it easily deserves a top 5 spot. Like the aforementioned Sky Rush, Intimidator 305 at Virginia's King's Dominion is so intense and so crazy that it's not going to appeal for everyone. But as a hardcore thrill seeker, this thing has always been right up my alley. After you drop 300 feet, you spend most of the ride hugging the ground and whipping through insanely sharp transitions. It's the number 1 coaster I've been on for pacing, and it's also by far the most forceful, which is just absolutely absurd. Steel Vengeance at Ohio Cedar Point has been widely considered the world's best roller coaster since it opened in 2018. For 2 years, it was my number 1, and that is no small feat. On the contrary, you have these people who think this ride is overrated, but I can tell you for sure it's far from it. Cedar Point built this ride to be the world's best coaster, and considering it's got more airtime than any other and is just relentless the whole time, I'd say they did a pretty good job at it. I also appreciate how the second half takes place almost entirely within the ride's dense wooden structure, creating a sense of mystery as to where you're going next. It might objectively be the best ride in the world, but I personally find more enjoyment in my top-rated coaster for more than a year's running, and that's Ride to Happiness at Belgium's Plopsaland de Pan is an out-of-body experience from Mach Rides. It was the second rendition of their extreme spinning model, but as you can see, the original Time Traveler didn't even make my top 50 despite it still being a great ride. This thing ups the ante times 100 with outrageously strong airtime and 5 incredible inversions, all the while you're spinning out of control. Pair that with the best onboard audio ever, and you've got yourself my personal favorite roller coaster on the planet. If you haven't already, put this ride at the top of your bucket list and try to get on it as soon as possible. Alright guys, that's going to do it for part 2 of my top 100 roller coasters I've ridden. If you enjoyed, feel free to give this video a like and subscribe to Coaster Dash so you don't miss any content like this in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye guys.